So I'm going to talk today about a hike I took. I love being outside and going on hikes. And so this is about a short journey that I planned with a number of friends several years ago. But you know, like many journeys, it didn't quite end the way we were expecting. So this is Vesper Peak. It is a modest peak in the North Cascades, which is where I came from. And the plan was that as a group, we were going to climb the mountain on a beautiful, clear fall day. Now, as things don't always go the way you plan, it was cold, wet, windy, and it was really quite a miserable hike. And there was something else that made this the beginning of a much longer journey, which was that I'd been diagnosed with cancer. And I had a journey ahead that included radiation, chemotherapy, surgeries, and quite a lot more. And when I got to the top of this mountain with my friends, it just felt like, you know, maybe this was good enough. Maybe I should just stay here. So I found a spot in between a few boulders and just curled up in a ball. And in the wind and the rain, I just lost my sense of all outside things. And all I could feel was the cold, wet stone against my face. I thought, yeah, this is fine. I think I'll just stay right here. So in the acceptance of that. Now, my friends thought there was a better idea. We should probably get down from the mountain. So they put me back on my feet, and I began making my way down. But because they were there to help me, I knew that there was a way forward. So I'm going to talk about the journey from there through cancer, what it was like, some of the mistakes I made, and some of the successes that I had, and hopefully some tools and resources that may be useful for other people who are in a similar kind of journey. Now, when I was diagnosed in 2005, I had the normal response, which was I was in shock. I mean, I couldn't believe this was happening to me. I was in my 30s, I was healthy, I was in complete disbelief at this. You know, why should this happen? And so I was filled with anxiety and the overwhelming uncertainty of what my future was going to hold. It was as if I had a 3 to 5 year trajectory ahead of me that I had planned, that I thought, you know, yeah, sure, my kids will be growing and they'll be about between here and here. And suddenly that whole structure exploded. I had no idea what my future held. So that uncertainty was an enormous aspect of this. And it was a completely disorienting kind of experience. I was just not able to find a way to put this into the context of my life. It was like I'd been dropped on another planet. I mean, how was I going to find the tools that I needed to move forward? This was unmapped territory. It was completely science fiction. And this, by the way, is a photo from Mars. And it really captures the feeling of where I thought I was. There were no trails ahead. There was a completely unfamiliar landscape to deal with. So I want to ask, can we be better prepared for an experience like this? Can we be prepared for something like cancer? Is it possible? Well, what other kind of life-threatening things do we prepare for? Well, we prepare for fires. We have smoke detectors in our homes. We have snake bite kits. We have many things to help prepare for earthquakes and many other things that are equally life-threatening. When we get on planes, we're prepared for a water landing. So why is it that we're unprepared for landing, for cancer? Why is it that that comes as a shock or a surprise? Especially when you think about the odds, which really are quite shocking. You know, we have a 1 in 150 million chance of being in a water landing. And we have oxygen masks, and we have all kinds of things every time we get on a flight to prepare us for that kind of an eventuality. But we have a 4 out of 10 chance. And I want to look a little bit more closely at some of these numbers because it's hard to get your head around them. So, to think of it, it's a really daunting aspect of this experience. 40% of us, you or someone in the chair next to you, is very likely in your lifetime to have cancer. It's a little bit higher chance if you're a man or a little lower if you're a woman, but still, that's an extraordinary statistic. So how many people does that turn into? I mean, numbers are really important, and it's difficult to look at them in a way that, that doesn't create extreme alarm. And particularly if you have cancer, you find out that the way you look at numbers really matters. So to get a sense of this, just in 2009 in the US, there are going to be 1.5 million people diagnosed with cancer. There's nothing shocking about getting cancer. It happens to quite a lot of people. And that works out to 4,000 people a day, 3 people a minute, or about 50 people during this talk alone are going to be diagnosed with cancer. So there's nothing inconceivable about it. It's actually a fairly common human experience. To look at this from a cancer survivor's perspective, about 1 million people who are diagnosed are going to live beyond their cancer. They're going to outlive their cancer. And that's 2 people a minute, or 33 people during this talk will be diagnosed this year and who will live beyond their cancer. Now, I'm not really going to talk about prevention very much, but that's obviously a huge part of being prepared. But I saw this statistic and was really shocked by it, which is that about 64% of cancer deaths were preventable. And if you apply that statistic to diagnoses, that's about 1 million people have cancer that could have been prevented. So we know some things about being prepared. We know that calm, informed, and planned responses improved survival. So what would it take for us to reach a point where we have a plan, that there's something that we know that's available to us that will keep us afloat in a difficult situation? Now, all the survival plans that I've seen around cancer have to do with things after diagnosis. You are given information about, what kind of treatment you're going to deal with, etc. But no one talks about what do you need before that time. So here's a very simple cancer basic information card. Obviously, if you're diagnosed, you do need to find good doctors. And I want to mention that you don't have to go to another planet. You don't need to have that entire experience of shock and disbelief. It's not part of what you need. You need to put together a support team, and I'm going to talk more about that. You need to obviously manage health insurance and finances. We need to go through treatment and recover. That's the beginning, middle, and end of the cancer journey for most people. So how can we put that in form that people can have accessibly available to them? Now, when you find out yourself in a crisis, and I certainly found myself in one, you fall back on your training. And there were 2 areas of my training that mattered in relation to this. One was I was familiar with nonprofit organizations, and the other was that I was familiar with software. So these are some of the organizations that I worked with when I reached out to them. It was Cancer Lifeline provided counseling and therapy support services, Gilda's Club, and also an incredible organization that provided resources. Lots of Helping Hands, which allows you to provide, have an online community to support you through treatment, and Share the Care, which is another organization that helps manage that process. And I reached out to all of those. What I found is that communities and social networks aren't just for chatting and discussing things. They actually can be survival tools. You can depend on your friends. And naturally, what happened for me was that people who I love and who cared about me deployed that safety net around me. Now, what we did was we held a Share the Care meeting, which is a group meeting where we got together a group of friends and family, and we discussed, well, how could we do something to help this situation? In a traditional support situation, you have a couple family members who are carrying the major burden of the experience, and you have doctors. And so because it's a small group, it tends to be one that's easily overburdened. So what we did was had a broader group of people participating. And not only did we have a core support group, we had an online wiki, which is a simple editable website that allowed us to, on a weekly basis, put a list together of all the tasks that needed to get taken care of. And from the day that I was diagnosed and before treatment, I had 120 tasks that needed to get taken care of. And there was just no way that I could handle it. And I wasn't someone who wanted to just reach out for help. It's hard to do that. I remember just driving in the car one day, and the kids in the back were unhappy. They hadn't had enough to eat. The car's rattling because I hadn't had time to take it to the shop to get it repaired, and all of these things just were cascading. And it just felt like there was no way to move forward except by asking for help. So with this online editable website, we had people from around the country helping. I had a nurse, my aunt who's a nurse on the East Coast who's retired. She had incredible insight that I absolutely relied on. And because we had an online community where I could put the information in a single place and everyone could hear about it, it was a way for her to participate without my being a single point of communication bottleneck. It really made a huge difference. And so everyone in this community knew what was needed and what kind of help would matter. So instead of being passive people wondering what they could do to help, they knew exactly what was needed. Whether it was a meal, whether it was childcare, whether it was a ride to the doctor, or any of quite a lot of other kinds of things. So instead of a situation where we had a couple heroes, a few people, and absolutely they made an enormous difference. My doctors, my wife, my family, they played incredible roles. The situation was more of a community being the hero. And each one of these people made a huge difference. And everyone wants to be able to do something that will have a positive impact when someone is suffering. I think we need a word in the English language that describes that. I mean, empathy is something, but the feeling of doing something, a simple task, that will ease someone's suffering and make their lives better is a very powerful tool. So I'll talk a little bit about treatment. I went through radiation treatment, and radiation involved about 18 million volts of radiation X-rays put with me as the target. Very strange experience. There's just really nothing like that kind of an appointment, let me tell you. Chemotherapy, also extremely weird. You know, the first thing that they had to do before chemotherapy was we had a port put in under my skin, so I had an implant. I was a part cyborg implanted with this that went straight to my heart to allow the chemotherapy to work most effectively. And so I also dealt with these very strange side effects, like you lose your hair, you have your fingernails potentially turning black and falling out. You have neuropathy where you experience any sensation that is cold as if it's pain. I mean, completely weird experiences. I mean, I've had a lot of different kinds of experiences, but this was really in a class by itself. And I had surgery as well. And in my surgery, they had this pain scale, because the nurses and doctors know that if they can measure your pain, they can manage it. Now, the thing was that they were doing a great job of managing the pain, but what was I going to do and how was I going to manage the weirdness, the completely weird experience of these disorienting treatments and lifestyle? So I developed the weirdness scale. And, sorry. So when the weirdness reaches about a level of 6, it's time to proactively do something about it. And if you get to 10, and I did on many occasions, you have got to intervene proactively. There's just no way to deal with this other than through proactive management. So aside from the mechanics of getting through treatment and dealing with this kind of thing and being one of that 1 million survivors who make it through treatment and make it beyond treatment and beyond their cancer, there's a meditation and spiritual aspect to this experience. I found that it was very important to use this as a time of healing and a time of recovery and retreat. And unfortunately, there were a lot of people who I saw in support groups and people who I knew and met through treatment who really weren't able to go beyond this point. The isolation that they felt, the suffering that they experienced, the pain, the weirdness, all of these things were just too great a stress for some of them. And I ask that we all try to reach out to people who are in that kind of situation, to overcome our fear of this alien kind of experience, to think of the word of cancer as if it's an ordinary word, not this thing that we need to be terrified of on an ongoing basis. And what I found in my meditation is that there's focused surrender that's required. You need to let go of your experience and move forward. But also that there's really no obstacle that can surround the human spirit. There's always a way forward, and a way around, and a way through that kind of an experience. And that really helped me to get through it. Sometimes when you find out that you need to live in the woods for a while, and you may never be able to get out of the woods, it's important to realize that you can learn to live in the woods. And that we each do have a full life that we get to live. No one knows how long or how short their life is going to be. But we know that from its beginning until this moment, it's complete, it's full. And to accept that is a really important step in finding a future beyond cancer. Now, a lot of people talk about some of the positive aspects of having cancer experience, and I definitely experienced that. I mean, I felt like I was doing things that were impossible. I mean, how was I going to get through this? It was unbelievable. My focus on the future had completely disappeared. My focus on the past became irrelevant. So I was fully focused on the present. And I'll never forget coming home from surgery and seeing the grass, how green it was. I swear to you, it was painted green. It was so vivid and so real and so full. And then after convalescing for a few months, I was able to mow the lawn again for the first time. And I had this absolutely giddy and joyous feeling of being able to do something as simple as that, but being capable again in a new way. It was very empowering. Now, I feel that there are some cancer superpowers, that these are abilities that you get, that you have access to. You're tapping into capabilities you didn't know you had in a lot of different ways. Two of my favorites are selective attention deficit disorder. You can ignore the unhelpful. There are always people who want to say things that they think were really helpful, but sometimes you just got to let those go. And then ultra stress management, which is the ability to handle any stress, no matter how great it is. You can just be with it and let it be. This is just a partial list. There's quite a lot fewer, and I'm sure many of you who know other people who've gone through experiences like this have tapped into others. Recurrence Ridge is part of the cancer journey, and there's no journey through cancer that's complete without a pass by it. Now, I experienced having so many times when you have these invitations to consider recurrence. Every time you have a scan or a blood test, it's potentially a limited extension of your lease on life. And to have these tests where your experience is not going to define what your outcome is, but it's this external test, living with that is very important. But more and more people are recovering through 2, 3, and 4 recurrences and succeeding and living through that and beyond that. So finally I reached a place of recovery where instead of feeling isolated, I found that there were other people who had very similar experiences. I'm not a one-person show. There are 1 million people who are going to live beyond their cancer, 1.5 million people who are going to be diagnosed just this year. And so instead of seeing the journey as just one of a single peak to climb, for me, I learned that every step is the peak. And now, as I find myself looking back and watching my footsteps disappear and letting this experience go into the past, I'm gingerly recovering the ability to generate new projects and starting to recreate and develop a future. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank every one of you who has done something to help someone who's survived through a difficult situation or a situation of cancer, because I'm here because of you. And I want to thank also you also for just listening today. So thanks a lot. Putting up with the slides.